All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the session. So I'm Mo, I'm the Business Development Manager covering the Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey, and it's a pleasure to be here with this amazing set of panelists. I'm so excited to talk to you about emerging markets, why they matter. I'm so excited that I've been up since 4 a.m. today. Had nothing to do with 2 screaming kids at the same time. It's just pure excitement about the topic. So I'll just walk you through a couple of slides of why we are particularly excited as Google Play about emerging markets before I invite our panelists to join me on stage. So, if anybody's been living under a rock, Android's pretty big. It's going to be growing quite a bit over the next few years as well. External projections putting it at over 4 billion in a few years' time. But what we're seeing is that 2/3 of all new Android users are actually coming from emerging markets. Right? So if you are looking at the next wave of growth for you, this is where you need to be, and these are the markets you need to be investing in. And you might be thinking, oh yeah, that's great, we'll look at this in a few years' time. But the opportunity is real today. So we looked at, for our EMEA-based developers, we looked at where are you getting your installs? What are the top markets? And what we found was 3 of the 4 top markets in which you're getting installs are actually emerging markets. Those are India, Brazil, and Russia, right? And again, you might be thinking, that's great, we're getting users, but do they actually bring in any money? And the truth is, they do. So again, looking at the top 30 countries by spend for our EMEA-based developers, we found that 6 of the top 30 countries are, again, from emerging markets. And that's a rate that's going to continue to go up. So we're seeing around 60% year-on-year growth in spend coming from emerging markets. So don't just take it from me. We have an amazing set of panelists who are going to share their experiences with you. And hopefully, this will be a discussion that will get you excited and leave you with some ideas of how you can go after these markets. First up, we've got Saad, who's the CEO of Miniclip.
Thank you, Mo. Hello, everybody. I've already passed the first test because I thought I was going to stack on those stairs. Also, thank you, Google. Let's clap it up for our Google account managers, everybody. Let's clap it up. Yes. Let's get the energy up. Yeah, so we're Miniclip. One of the games that we're well known for is 8-Ball Pool. It's got a very large audience. We have 200 million players every month engaging with our content. And one of the areas that we've been working in particularly with Google on quite strategically is 8-Ball Pool in India. It's probably not a territory that many of you guys are focusing on. And the question would be, is this something that you should be looking at? I would say India is just one of the emerging markets that you should be talking about, because we will talk about others in a bit. But one of the things that we've definitely seen in growing our audience in India is just the changes in consumer behavior, just down to something so simple as data plans being far more affordable for the standard consumer. Once that started happening in India, we saw a massive, massive uptick in users in that territory, because obviously we've got a multiplayer game, and when you've got a multiplayer game, it does take up your data package. But in India, they really responded well to that kind of simple thing. So we saw a lot of growth there. And I don't know how much you want to go into around the monetization techniques on the panel. But we've actually seen some good monetization there. We're in the top grossing charts in Android. You can see it for yourself. And I would say it's a very, very meaningful territory for us. And it's in our top 10 of revenue generators now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Saad. Next up, we have Kristina, who's the VP of Growth for Memrise, a great language learning app.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for Google for the invite to share some insights from Memrise as well. So Memrise is a language learning app with 40 million learners from more than 180 countries all around the world. In terms of emerging markets, although we are based in London, in Great Britain, the emerging markets, especially Russia, Poland, Mexico, Brazil, and even Turkey, are quite an important part of our user base growth. It would be very exciting to share some insights and things that we have done and experienced in these markets in the panel. I think it sounds very trivial and straightforward, but one of the key learnings so far has been that the more you understand the markets, the more you understand the local need for learning a language, the better you're set for a correct value proposition and delivering the promise that people expect from different countries. And it can be something as simple as providing a US English course instead of British English course for Brazilians, or investing in the right languages to offer for Russians. So small details like that can make a big difference and give a lot of guidance to the product teams and business as well. So really excited to be here today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kristina. Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Anatoly, who's the CEO of Game Insights.
Thanks, guys. So we launched Guns of Boom, a first-person shooter for Android around 14 months ago, but the story behind its launch starts much earlier. Like 2 years ago, we decided to use Turkey, then Russia, those emerging markets, as a test bed to validate the game. And in contrast to many tier 1 launches, like let's try launching in Canada first, we used those markets and we discovered that we have to support low-end devices. We have to address loading speeds, device performance, data consumptions. And I think tackling emerging markets first has allowed us to enter many other markets, including India, Brazil, and other markets that are growing at a huge, enormous pace of millions of downloads. So I think the biggest success behind our presence in Google Play was that we have integrated a way for players to upload their replays to YouTube. A lot of those emerging markets have creators and influencers that are eager to share the content locally. And the spread of that, the spread of that is enormous. It's thousands and thousands of daily video uploads to YouTube, and the consumption rate is really high. The other essential part is tackling what we call tier 0 pricing methods. It's creating the unique value proposition for as tiny value as it gets, for the smallest price tiers out there. So try that, do that, and if you start with those markets, it's going to be much easier to scale globally. So this is a couple of key takeaways. I guess we'll discuss more.
Great.
Thanks to Google.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. All right. So one of the first questions that we get from developers is, OK, yeah, emerging markets, that's great, but where do we start? Where do we go to? For you, what was the decision factor to go after these specific markets, other than a personal interest in just visiting those markets?
I guess we saw a lot of user growth in India because of the change in the data providers. And whenever we see users growing that dramatically, then you just pay attention to it naturally. We've all got our analytics dashboards. We can all see what's lighting up and what's growing. And so then you just kind of naturally make that choice. I have seen from others, and for us, especially for us EMEA-based developers, I tend to think anything that's close to home is a little easier as well to kind of concentrate on. But for us, it was the fact that we saw audience growth in India. As I'm sure many people have seen across other emerging markets, we've also seen that growth in Brazil, which is why we're concentrating on Brazil as well. But if you see players downloading stuff, then you tend to kind of see what you can to try and further encourage them to play your games.
Was it similar experience for you? Follow the users, basically?
Yes, Memrise has mostly grown organically so far, and I mean, language learning is something that people in almost every single country tend to and want to do, and you can focus on so many different regions and areas. But for us, it was one thing was sort of organic new user numbers that we obviously monitored, but not less significant factor was actually subscriber user base. So we started seeing trends where it was easier for us to convert people and to make them Memrise subscribers. And we actually then saw that, okay, if there's already organic interest, then what can we do to actually improve the value proposition and offering so that more people from these countries have a reason to use our app and learn languages.
Fantastic.
Well, even though we started with the US as the global launch market, we figured out that based on the number of YouTube uploads, the game resonates well with a variety of emerging markets. So we had to tackle that. We went to Google Play team, talked about those markets, went to local Playtime events, learned more about it, worked with local creators. So it was more of a discovery process. Where do we put our efforts into? And especially like just optimizing for some of those markets, it might not be really self-explaining. So it was quite a learning curve. But once we got a couple of first countries in, it got easier. So now I think if we look at top 8 countries, 7 of them, in terms of monthly downloads, are emerging countries for us.
Fantastic. So you see the user growth somewhere, you decide you want to go after a market, and typically one of the things we advise our developers is to actually localize for those markets. But localization can be quite a broad spectrum, right? From just translating text in-game to all the way to actually customizing characters, changing the in-app experience for different markets. How do you decide where do you want to be on that spectrum?
Well, we take an approach when we build the games to try and reach the biggest audience possible. So, I mean, for Pool, for instance, everyone asks us, what do you do to culturalize or localize the game apart from strings? I mean, there's not much to culturalize if you think about it. It's, it's a stick hitting a ball into a pocket, right? Like, that's the game. And if you don't know, if you can't understand that game...
Don't oversell it.
Yeah. I mean, but the point is, if you can't understand that globally, then that's going to be a difficult thing. So I think it's a bit unfair to ask us. I mean, if you're making a RPG game or maybe even a shooting game, it might be a different thing from terms of character design and look and feel. But for us, what we do see in localization and what we've learned over the last year is the things and the promotions which tend to be popular in tier 1 markets don't necessarily translate into the emerging markets. So we've seen just, if you look at our top in-app purchases and the top things that people buy, it is almost skewed in India compared to where it would be in a tier 1 market. In a tier 1 market, they would be more open to, say, a gacha mechanic or some sort of card pack or something. Whereas in the emerging markets, we tend to find that the hard-nosed value for soft currency is what people want. They want to know exactly what they're going to get. That's been our finding. And therefore, our localization efforts means that our promotions need to cater for that and what we present to that audience. So that's where we kind of sit on it.
Yes, we have paid attention to different phases of the user acquisition funnel. So there are things that you can do to be a lot more relevant on Google Play product page already. So making sure that you highlight things that these people from the emerging market countries are really interested in. You can customize and sort of even the selection of screenshots that you prioritize to upload to the Play Store can teach quite a lot about what the users appreciate from these countries. And even making the content relevant. So Memrise offers tens of language pairs and tens of languages to learn for different users. It's important to understand what are the top ones. Two Turkish people want to learn English, German, and Russian. So there's no point in prioritizing Brazilian Portuguese or Spanish for them in order to actually be super relevant. And then also pricing. I think localized pricing is something that has really unlocked opportunities in different countries and where it can make a big difference whether you get sort of 0.5% of people to pay versus a few percentages of people to pay. So there are different things to look at, different stages of the funnel and optimization opportunities almost everywhere.
So on our side, I think back in January, we ran one of the global events, which was the Lunar New Year. And it was kind of counterintuitive for us as a local event that was launched globally, has performed as well as Christmas or something like that in the US, but globally. So Lunar New Year was accepted by everyone across the world. So since then, every single local event, we try to launch it globally. We try to see how that works. Like nowadays, like we recently rolled out local content for India, and it was well received. And I think it's just because of the collectible nature of things inside our game. People just want to try all of that, and they want to have all the costumes, all of the suits, and want to try it all. So I think like it might work in different ways for different types of games. So you have to try different strategies.
So one of the things that we obviously know is that purchasing power varies between tier 1 mature markets compared to emerging markets. How do you cater for that? How have you thought about pricing when you've gone actually after emerging markets?
So the first thing we have looked at and tested quite a bit as well is to see what is the sweet spot for different subscription plans. So it's very easy to set up monthly, 3 monthly, 6 monthly annual plans, and then see which one works and how to kind of find the good spot for the exact price that has the highest LTV and long-term sort of potential for the app. So there's a lot of ways how to experiment with that. We have seen that in some emerging markets, people tend to pick the cheapest and also the shortest period subscriptions, and then thinking of strategies how to change that and how to make the longer plans either more affordable or more appealing and communicating the right value. The latest experiment we did was in Mexico, where we saw that there is a very high proportion of users who, instead of going for annual price, which is the overwhelming preferred one from Memrise, 70% of people from Mexico actually picked the monthly price. Without doing anything else but just increasing the monthly price subscription fee a little bit, we see the shift towards people preferring the annual suddenly. Yeah. So just experimenting around that and really kind of understanding the dynamics and the levers that you have with Google Play tools as well can give quite interesting results.
Anatoly.
Yeah, for multiplayer games, it's much harder. People in the US might complain about lower tier pricing in the other country, but we found a sweet spot. Players might spend hundreds and sometimes even thousands of dollars inside those games. So we figured out that giving out the free, cheaper starter packs that might be worth $10 or even $100 in some of those emerging markets for much smaller price, it really doesn't affect the gameplay or game economy that much. So that's what we opted in for. We are creating those packs that might be worth $100 in US, and we do one-time offers, the regional offers, and giving them one time at much, much lower prices. And that worked well for us. It converts the users in those regions much better, and it's a great value for the price. So you have to find what you are going to give away even for as low as 15 cents. It needs to have the value. And if you try to compare that to US price, it might be just one med kit or one ammo pack, but that doesn't sell well in emerging market. You have to create this whole bundle worth 15 cents. And we are okay with that because there is just so much more things to explore and buy once they get released, either seasonal content or the new maps or things down the road. So we are totally fine giving away those bigger packs initially for much lower prices.
And with this, do you not worry about users from the US switching over to emerging markets and trying to take advantage of those packs?
So since these are only starter packs for new users that you are able to acquire in the first weeks, it's not really a big issue. It's not like something that you could get 6 months after you play the game. So that's how we managed to address this issue.
So, okay, so I've got a question for you, Anatoly. So what you're saying is you do a geo-priced starter pack only, but then afterwards you just have standard pricing across the globe.
Well, we do have some discounts and deals and things like that, but yeah, well, some of those deals are kind of still pricey. So we don't really adjust the value of the currency for those countries because that's the question. Like, you can't really do that, as too many people will try to switch the region. You know, like other platforms, like PC platforms, are also dealing with that. Too many players are trying to buy the currency in other regions, so we don't try to do that.
So we did that. We did a whole geo-pricing activity where we changed prices completely. I'm not going to talk about that question because we're working with your team right now and your Google Play engineers to try and resolve that. That's totally an issue. If you change prices in one territory and you've got a community, people will go and try and game the system. VPNs are easy to get, particularly on this platform. I think we need to acknowledge that. But it's too early to tell with geo-pricing for us right now. We definitely saw an impact in conversion. We definitely saw people spend more. And for us, it wasn't just a starter pack. It was across the whole store, across the whole economy. And the reality right now is we're not sure how that's affected LTV, because we don't know if people are doing more purchases little and often, or if they're still buying like the one pack that they would have done before but got more for it. So we really are still balancing that thing. But ultimately for us, I think the more important question is, how much are you getting in terms of the share of wallet for that consumer in that region? And from what we see in these emerging markets, we're very encouraged by the fact that they're willing to spend on entertainment. The fact that there is a willingness to spend on IAP, I think is a very interesting thing, because I actually think that emerging markets have got to that step before even the tier 1 markets. I think it took a long time for free-to-play and IAP game mechanics to really be seen as the de facto business model here in tier 1 markets. Because if you think about it, even 5, 10 years ago, we were having debates about, is free-to-play the future? Yeah. We know it is, and no one really talks about that anymore. But in emerging markets, it's just, they don't even think about it. They don't worry about it. So that's where I think the geo-pricing stuff needs to be considered around the share of wallet for that consumer. Because obviously an Indian consumer does not have the same disposable income as a US consumer, but we've seen in China that change. Yeah. And obviously you just have to look at the kind of macroeconomic situation of some of these countries and nations that will eventually change. So we feel like being there early, making these steps and understanding how the consumer behaves is super important. So that's what I'd want to reinforce in that conversation.
I think like across our games portfolio throughout the years, we've definitely seen some of the markets transitioning from emerging to much more mature markets. Perhaps Southeast Asian markets that now have many more payment methods and people are just used to pay that. So I think it's just a matter of time when we will see more spending power in those countries. And like in a year or two, we're going to talk about those markets not as emerging. Remember that BRICS had China in it as an emerging market. Yeah. Now we don't speak about China. So nowadays I call it still BRICS, like Brazil, Russia, India, Turkey, Saudi Arabia.
I've heard of Mint as well, which is Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria. I've heard of all of them.
Yeah, we are seeing an interesting correlation between like the performance and business performance of certain regions and markets and the deep intention of people to learn a language. So an interesting case has been where we interviewed a significant amount of our subscribers from emerging markets as well, and then plotted it against data. And we saw that, for example, Russia and Poland and Turkey as well, where people can learn one level, any language for free, and then have to subscribe. The speed and the conversion rate at very early stages of user onboarding was the highest in countries where the language learning intention tends to be sort of less casual, less kind of fun hobby activity, and more kind of need and sort of aspiration and professional improvement related. And it's quite fascinating because it gives a lot of insights for product and tweaks and improvements in your onboarding as well. If you know how to nail this need versus yes, we can match the needs correlation. So it's quite useful to understand the behaviors and the motivators behind users of apps for these purposes.
Fantastic.
Can I ask a question of the crowd?
Yeah, go ahead.
If they're going to engage. How many of you are taking active steps to do something in emerging markets? Just 1, 2, 3.
That's a decent number.
It's a decent smattering, but okay. And how many of you? Obviously, you're considering it because you're listening here. But how many of you think it's probably a waste of effort, or you don't have the resources to really, attack it?
You can be honest.
You can be honest. One,
Like
one person, 2, 3. Come on, there's no more. That's the, OK, all right. So actually, everybody believes there's effort. And I think actually the reality of this is it's not a lot of effort.
It's not.
It's not a lot of effort because of, to be honest, what you guys have done over the last few years. I think again, Google has done a great job. And it's easy for me to say this on a Google stage. But Google has done a great job in allowing us to have the tools to really make efforts in emerging markets. So I think if you're looking to do it and you haven't really done anything because a few people haven't, it's just literally go in the Google Play Developer Console and you can start.
Yep. That's very true.
I know you're not allowed to say that, but it's easy for me to say, yeah.
It's, obviously, when I say it, nobody will believe me because I'm paid to say it.